One ship on this list cost the United States government over $13 billion, was delivered years behind schedule, and suffered from an elevator and weapons launch system so unreliable that during early deployment its own crew joked they were sailing the most expensive science experiment in naval history. It is also on paper the most powerful warship ever constructed by any nation on Earth, but exactly why this technological marvel nearly became a billion-dollar embarrassment before it ever fired a shot in anger is something we will reveal at the end of this video. This is the complete story of every aircraft carrier the United States Navy has ever built. From a converted collier ship with a wooden flight deck in 1922 to the nuclear-powered leviathans patrolling the oceans today, it is a story of engineering triumph, Cold War brinkmanship, and a century-long arms race fought not on land, but on the deck of a moving airfield. USS Langley, CV-1. Before the United States Navy understood what an aircraft carrier even was, it had one. The USS Langley began its life as a coal-carrying collier ship named Jupiter before the Navy converted it in 1920, welding a flat wooden flight deck across its entire upper hull. Sailors nicknamed it the covered wagon, and every single procedure for launching, landing, and storing aircraft at sea had to be invented from scratch aboard this single vessel. There was no rule book. Pilots who attempted early landings frequently crashed into the ship's superstructure or missed the deck entirely, plunging into the ocean because no one yet understood how to design an arresting cable system that could reliably catch a moving aircraft. Every failure taught the Navy something new, and by the time Langley was converted to a seaplane tender in 1937, the awkward, dangerous lessons learned aboard this converted coal ship had become the foundation of American naval aviation doctrine. USS Lexington and USS Saratoga built on the hulls of canceled battle cruisers. The Lexington and Saratoga were, at the time of their 1927 commissioning, the largest aircraft carriers in the world, capable of carrying over 90 aircraft each. Their sheer size demonstrated to naval planners that a carrier could function not as an experimental curiosity, but as the primary striking arm of an entire fleet. When Lexington was sunk during the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942, the loss sent shockwaves through the American public. But the battle itself proved something the Navy had suspected but never fully tested. For the first time in naval history, two opposing fleets fought an entire battle without their ships ever coming within sight of one another. The outcome decided entirely by carrier-launched aircraft. USS Yorktown-class, the Yorktown Enterprise, and Hornet formed the backbone of American naval power during the darkest opening months of the Pacific War. USS Yorktown. Despite suffering severe damage at the Battle of the Coral Sea that naval engineers estimated would require 3 months to repair, was patched together in a frantic 72-hour effort at Pearl Harbor. Welders working around the clock while the ship still floated in dry dock, because American intelligence had just cracked Japanese naval codes and discovered an attack was coming at a place called Midway. Yorktown sailed into that battle held together by makeshift steel plating, and its aircraft helped sink 3 Japanese fleet carriers in a single morning. A turning point that historians consider the single most consequential naval battle of the 20th century. USS Enterprise would go on to become the most decorated ship in American naval history, earning 20 battle stars and surviving the entire war, despite being repeatedly reported sunk by Japanese propaganda broadcasts. A ghost ship that refused to die. USS Essex-class. The Yorktown-class won the early defensive battles. The Essex-class carriers were what won the war outright through sheer overwhelming production. The United States built 24 Essex-class carriers during the war, an industrial achievement that Imperial Japan, even with its skilled naval architects, simply could not match or comprehend. Each Essex carrier could launch over 90 aircraft, and by 1944, American carrier task forces built around these ships were so numerous and so lethal that Japanese naval aviation had effectively ceased to exist as an organized fighting force. Its remaining pilots increasingly resorting to kamikaze attacks, specifically because conventional aerial combat against American carrier air groups had become a suicide mission with worse odds than a deliberate one. USS Midway-class commissioned just after the Second World War ended. The Midway-class carriers were built with armored flight decks specifically designed to survive kamikaze strikes. A lesson paid for in blood during the final brutal year of the Pacific War. USS Midway itself would go on to serve for an astonishing 47 years. A service life so long that the ship launched propeller-driven fighters at its commissioning and was still operating advanced jet aircraft during the Gulf War in 1991. A single hull bridging two entirely different eras of naval aviation technology. USS Forrestal-class carriers, entering service in the mid-1950s, were the first American carriers purpose-built from the keel up for jet aircraft operations, featuring the now iconic angled flight deck that allowed simultaneous launch and recovery operations without aircraft colliding into each other. A design innovation borrowed and refined from British naval engineering. But USS Forrestal itself would become tragically famous not for innovation but for catastrophe. In July 1967, off the coast of Vietnam, an electrical malfunction accidentally fired a rocket from one parked aircraft directly into a fuel tank of another, igniting a fire that detonated bombs across the flight deck in a chain reaction. The disaster killed 134 sailors in what remains the deadliest incident aboard a U.S. Navy ship since the Second World War. And among the young officers who survived that inferno, learning firsthand how fire discipline aboard a carrier could mean the difference between life and death, was a young naval aviator named John McCain. USS Enterprise, CVN-65, the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Commissioned in 1961, USS Enterprise carried 8 separate nuclear reactors, a staggeringly complex propulsion arrangement that gave the ship virtually unlimited range and allowed it to operate at sustained high speed for years without refueling. This nuclear power represented an entirely new strategic reality. An American carrier could now remain on station indefinitely, projecting air power anywhere on the planet without depending on vulnerable fuel supply lines that an enemy could target and cut. USS Kitty Hawk-class, the final class of conventionally powered supercarriers built by the United States. The Kitty Hawk-class represented the last generation of American flat-tops that did not rely on nuclear propulsion. USS Kitty Hawk itself would go on to become the oldest active ship in the entire U.S. Navy by the time of its retirement in 2009. A floating monument to an entire generation of naval aviators who served aboard her throughout the Cold War and into the War on Terror. USS Nimitz-class and Nimitz-class supercarriers form the backbone of American naval power today, each displacing over 100,000 tons and carrying 2 nuclear reactors, capable of powering the ship for over 20 years without refueling. A single Nimitz-class carrier generates more electrical power than a small American city, and its flight deck can launch a fighter jet from 0 to over 150 miles per hour in under 2 seconds using steam-powered catapults. A violence of acceleration so extreme that pilots describe the sensation as being fired from a cannon. USS Theodore Roosevelt, one of the class, became the center of a national controversy in 2020 when its commanding officer was relieved of duty after publicly warning about a COVID-19 outbreak spreading uncontrolled through the ship's crowded lower decks, a crisis that exposed just how vulnerable even the most powerful warship on Earth remained to an invisible enemy that no amount of armor plating could stop.
USS Gerald R. Ford. This is the ship referenced at the beginning of this video. The USS Gerald R. Ford, commissioned in 2017, represents the most expensive warship ever constructed in human history, with a final program cost exceeding $13 billion. Its most revolutionary feature is the electromagnetic aircraft launch system, which replaced the steam catapults used on every previous American carrier, with a system using electromagnetic energy to launch aircraft with far greater precision and significantly less mechanical stress on the airframes. In theory, this technology represented a genuine engineering leap forward. In practice, during its early years of service, the system suffered from catastrophic reliability problems so severe that Navy officials publicly acknowledged the ship could not sustain the combat sortie rate required of a frontline carrier. The advanced weapons elevators, designed to move munitions from deep storage to the flight deck using powerful magnets instead of traditional cables, were so plagued by software and mechanical failures that the ship deployed for years with several elevators completely non-functional, forcing sailors to manually transport weapons through the ship in a labor-intensive workaround that defeated the entire purpose of the multi-billion-dollar automated system. Congressional investigators and Navy auditors spent years documenting cost overruns and schedule delays that turned what was supposed to be the crown jewel of American naval power into a case study in defense procurement dysfunction. Only after years of continuous engineering fixes did the Gerald R. Ford finally begin approaching the operational reliability standards the Navy had originally promised Congress, proving that even the most advanced warship ever built could very nearly be undone not by an enemy, but by its own untested technology. From a converted coal ship with sailors inventing the rules of carrier aviation through trial and fatal error, to a $13 billion nuclear-powered marvel nearly crippled by its own electromagnetic ambition, the history of the American aircraft carrier is fundamentally a story about risk. Every single ship on this list represented the absolute edge of what naval engineering could achieve at the moment of its construction, and nearly every one of them paid some price, in dollars, in delays, or in the lives of the sailors who served aboard them, to push that edge just a little further forward. Today, 11 of these floating airfields patrol the world's oceans, each one representing not just raw military power, but a century of accumulated lessons written in steel, fire, and the memory of every carrier that came before it.